Not super happy with the lighting. It's a little bit too creepy for me, but I'm sure you already understand that comparing yourself to other people is, generally speaking, not a great habit to have. As human beings, it is in our nature to compare ourselves to other people. More into that later. And it sucks. And it can be super harmful. And it usually makes us feel really f***ing bad. I heard someone in a meeting once call it compare and despair. And I love that. I mean, I don't love the process of it, but I love the cute little saying. This is especially true for people in sobriety or people who are trying to navigate sobriety. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own history with comparing and despairing. Then I'm going to look into the science behind why our brains do that. If there's any evidence to back up that comparing ourselves to other people is actually like a bad thing to do. Are there any consequences? Like, if so, what are the consequences of this behavior? Finally, I'm gonna give you guys an actionable tip that's going to hopefully help you end the vicious cycle of compare and despair in your sobriety and maybe like possibly enjoy your drug and alcohol-free life. Crazy concept, I know. Got my little immunity aid, Orange Burst, super delicious. Gonna be doing a review for this soon, so check that out. Anyway, yeah, so make sure to stay tuned till the very end or else. Hello, boys and girls, and everyone in between, and anyone who is neither, and anyone who is both. I am Allie K. Campbell. This is my YouTube channel. It is dedicated to getting real, having fun, and living sober. Every Wednesday, I upload a new sobriety tip to add to your sobriety toolbox. I call it the Sobriety Toolbox series, because I'm original. That's what you're watching right now. If you would like to get new sobriety tips weekly to add to your sobriety toolbox, you can go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Or don't, and live forever in your regrets. Before we get into today's topic, I want to thank all of my patrons because they make these videos possible. So, thank you very much, Anna, Kristen, Naomi, Beth, Chris, Tess, Rachel, Samantha, Lauren, Pam, and Tom. You guys keep me young. If you'd like to help me keep the lights on over here in my little YouTube studio, my bedroom, you can go ahead and become a patron too. You can go and check out the link and all the perks that come with doing so in the description of this video. Okay, let's do this. So although I'm a Libra sun and a Gemini rising, I also have a shit ton of Capricorn placements all over my chart. Ramsey, stop. So it's a bunch of like perfectionist ass energy that is good in the sense that it like makes me super hardworking, at least on the things that I actually care about. But at the same time, it also contributes to my tendency to like fall into a place of fear and to become very critical of myself and even to be cynical, especially if I'm feeling like threatened by my environment or the people in it. For as long back as I can remember, I was always in the habit of like comparing myself to others. Like I wasn't very academically gifted as a kid. Untreated ADHD will do that to you. I mean, I'm still not academically gifted, but whatever. But my cousins that were like around the same age as me were, and I remember always just thinking like, why can't I be more like them? Like, why am I not smart like them? Like, why are they getting better grades than me? Feeling really crappy about myself because I felt like my worth was tied to how well I like mirrored them. And this way of thinking kind of like followed me everywhere I went, and pretty much up until the point that I got sober and like received a couple of years of like good mental health help. And even now I still struggle with it from time to time. Even right before I got sober, and even like still in early sobriety, I would compare my past of substance abuse to other people's whose were objectively worse than mine. By doing that comparison, I like waited even longer to like get help or to like really like fully go into recovery, fully go into sobriety. I didn't think I was even worth sobriety. Like I didn't even think I was worth recovery because I was comparing myself to these other people who made it very easy for me to say like, oh no, like that is somebody who deserves to recover. Like that is somebody who really needs help with their addiction, like not like me. And it wasn't even like this thinking I'm better than, it was just this comparing myself to people. It wasn't even like a good thing to be comparing myself to, but I was still like making them better than me at it somehow. Kind of like my addiction or my substance abuse wasn't like serious enough to get help. If you're in that place right now, if you happen to be thinking that way, I'm here to tell you, and if you take one thing away from this video, take this: your addiction or your substance abuse or your drinking or your using, whatever you want to call it, it is worthy of getting help. You deserve help. You deserve treatment, whether it causes what you would call a small amount of harm in your life or a small amount of negative things in your life, or it is absolutely disastrous. It doesn't matter where you fall on the spectrum. You are worthy of recovery. You are worthy of getting better, of getting help, of getting sober. Okay, moving right along. My question is there any empirical evidence supporting the idea of comparing ourselves to others actually being bad for our health? Theon, please stop. Let's take a look at the research. Science! I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I do have a degree in communication, which is a little bit ironic because I really struggle to talk to people in real life. But in my time getting that degree, we had to do a lot of research on theory and psychology and communication and sociology and blah, 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 blah. Getting at is one of the things I learned is social comparison theory, dubbed by psychologist Leon Festinger, in 1954. It basically states that people determine their own worth and value based on how they stack up against the people around them or the people they compare themselves to. So at the very least, what we can do with this information is confirm that this is a very natural occurrence for people to do. AKA, if you do this, don't get too down on yourself because you're wired to. There's more to the story though. According to a study performed in 2006 titled Frequent Social Comparisons and Destructive Behaviors, the Dark Side of Social Comparison, we can guess where this is going, right? People who frequently engage in social comparison were more likely to experience envy, guilt, regret, and defensiveness. Not to mention, they were more likely to lie, blame others, and have unmet cravings. Y'all do know how bad those things are, right? Like a personality coiled up with all those behaviors and characteristics screams toxicity. I mean, it also screams like hurt and pain, so let's not be judgmental, let's have some compassion, but like generally speaking, like that person's up. And while the study does mention that there could be some positive effects to social comparisons in certain settings, generally speaking, when you do it frequently, when you do it often, and when you do it to a very high extent, it is disastrous, really. It can totally wreak havoc on our lives and our well-being. So then I found this cute little page about 8 primary emotions by James Madison University, shame being one of them. And guess what shame is made up of? In part, guilt, embarrassment, remorse, regret. Yes, pretty much the exact list of consequences that come from engaging in too much social comparison. So social comparison, for all intents and purposes, creates shame. Science. Now, when we look at what is admittedly a rather old study done by the Journal of Psychoactive Drugs, sounds like an interesting place to work, which states that addiction is likely very closely related to the feelings of shame and guilt. We pretty much already know this. This is like kind of a known thing in the recovery world at this point. But the thing is that this study talks about people in addiction struggling with excessive shame, excessive guilt, and a secondary emotion to those two experiences is often anger. What does this have to do with anything? Well, anger is another word for resentment. Kind of makes sense why people in 12-step programs often talk about how the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous states resentment is the #1 offender that destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Now, you might not necessarily identify with the term alcoholic. I don't. You might not even identify with 12 steps or the Big Book, but there are definitely like nuggets of wisdom there. And in this particular instance, like makes a whole lot of sense. So what can we do about it? What can we do about going into the compare and despair cycle? How can we stop ourselves from getting caught up in social comparison when it's so natural for us to do, when it's even more natural for people who struggle with substance abuse to do? Here's what I think, and here's what's worked for me. First, we need to recognize the fact that any social comparison we're doing between ourselves and another person is unfair. Because no matter how much we think we know about another person, the probability is very high that we are only scratching the surface of what this person's actual lived experience is anything like. So no matter what, even if you are very familiar with the person, or if it's somebody in your own family or someone you know very well, like if you're comparing yourself to someone else, it's still apples and oranges. It's always gonna be apples and oranges because y'all had different upbringings, y'all had different situations that happened, like you had different brains, you had different soul. It's always going to be an unfair comparison because you're never going to be at like an equal spot with anyone in the first place. It's like when we see that one friend who's always posting like super like happy and fun stuff on their Instagram, always doing like, you know, reaching like life milestones, and we kind of think to ourselves like, oh, like why haven't I done that yet? Or like, why am I not married yet? Why don't I have a kid yet? Why don't I have 5 cats yet? We have no idea what this person's actually going through. They might present themselves as fun, exciting, and hot. In reality, they might be like boring, lame, and just have like 4,000 filters on their picture or video. Second, we have to look at our own strengths instead of focusing on our weaknesses and other people's strengths. There was a time in my life where I genuinely believed that I had no strengths. all I could do was focus on the negative parts of my personality, my character defects. And if you're there, I feel you. But I also promise you that that is a lie you're telling yourself. You do have strengths. If you're not sure what your strengths are, take the quiz that I'm gonna link in the description of this video. When we focus on our strengths, instead of what we presume to be other people's strengths and our weaknesses, we shift our perspective to the positive, and we also set ourselves up to be working on things that we're already good at rather than trying to reach some arbitrary personal goal based on like another person's presumed success in whatever arena it might be. Thirdly, we can try, since comparison is still so natural to us, like we're never gonna stop altogether, but when we catch ourselves doing it, switch that so that instead of comparing ourselves to someone else, we can compare ourselves in the present to ourselves in the past. Even if you're not doing so great, there's definitely a good chance that there have been hurdles that you've gotten over in your life. There have been challenges that you've gone through. There's been growth that you've made. There's been positive changes that you've enacted in your life. Those things were not a part of the person you used to be, but they are a part of the person you are now. So if you're gonna compare yourself to someone, compare yourself to the person you used to be, because now you're better in probably more ways than one. You're your only real competition anyway, so it makes sense to just do it like that. Okay guys, that has been today's video. If you gained some value from it, I know social comparison is a natural thing. I know it's hard. I know it's especially hard for people in sobriety. I know it's especially hard when we're living like in this world of social media, especially after we've just been, or we're still in the middle of a pandemic and we can't get out much, so we're just like online a lot. At least I know I am. It's worth, you know, adding to your sobriety toolbox to try and avoid this. Try and shift that social comparison to a more self-comparison, one that's focusing on growth, especially if you're navigating sobriety or recovery. So I wish you well with doing that. Hope it's been helpful and it's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. See you next time.